Got it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Janelle, Mo, and Kelly's random astrology lessons in the royal family. Today, we're doing royal family astrology, wedding edition. Especially after a very heavy last episode, we thought this would be a lot of fun because we are heading into Libra season, all about partnership, maybe possible marriages, contracts, that sort of stuff. And we thought that looking at the royal family would be a lot of fun because all their charts are available and the history of their marriages are usually up for display on the internet. So it's great case studies as usual. So again, I'm joined by my lovely co-hosts. We have Miss Kelli Glazebrook. Hello. And Miss Mo here is ready to give us all that she has with her wonderful mask.
Yes. Hi.
And she's going to lecture from her great hall.
Yes.
My great hall.
Her great hall, she's going to lecture. So we're going to get started with some fun astrology charts. I think we have about 6 couples that we're going to be looking at. So we're going to be looking at their wedding day charts, as well as their Davison composite charts, and seeing what they say about the couple and what their marriage could have been like, or what obstacles they had, and what we see as astrologers in terms of what those charts offered them, whether it was a good chart, whether it was a not so great chart, what we would have offered or said, maybe wait a couple of days, or whether or not it was great, and we see the evidence of that.
Yeah. And also bear with us because we are in the shadow period of Mercury retrograde.
Yes,
Literally.
we are. So there
Mercury
might be glitches.
is not playing.
He's in the sign of Libra right now. He's heading into a square with Pluto. So let's just see how that plays out in today's charts. We might see some themes popping up.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's get started.
Whee!
So, royal weddings have long been used to strengthen political alliances, bolster nationalistic fervor, and display the strength and wealth of the country. I think we've seen over the years that anytime there's a downtime, a good wedding will cheer the country up.
Yeah, and it's a good way to display and get out all your jewels and polish them up. You got to get out your gold carriage and put the shine on it and get everyone in there. Yeah.
Nothing
Just
like
let
a
them
big
know.
crowd waving. Thank you. I'm getting married, which is usually the case with wedding days, right? We like to invite our family and friends to come join us in celebrating. But when you are royal, I guess the whole country gets to celebrate with you, which is a good and bad thing, I guess, right?
Go either way.
Go anywhere.
So yeah, I just wanted to put up a little thing about how like even, historically weddings were used to like cement and end like hostilities between warring countries, like the Wars of the Roses, which I mean, the only way that was resolved was when the 2 warring branches married their son and daughter. And then the Tudor dynasty was born. And it's like, that was the only way that they could just stop killing each other was by literally marrying their children. And I think a lot about what it must have been like to like marry your enemy, like the one that like killed members of your family. Like that's something.
To keep the peace, you have to marry your mortal enemy who might have killed your brother or your father. And you just have to,
deal with
married and have some heirs and deal with it for the strength and peace of the nation. A lot of pressure.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. And so there's definitely a lot of pressures on royal marriages.
It's not easy when your marriage is both a personal affair and a matter of national importance, right? So for example, Prince Margaret of the United Kingdom was not allowed to marry the man that she loved because he was divorcee. And so at the time that was very taboo. It was not deemed appropriate for the sister of the queen. And so it's probably a common belief that that denial of that marriage led to a lot of Margaret's long-lasting sadness, depression, probably addiction, and ultimate unhappy marriage that anyway ended up in divorce. So,
which is hella ironic,
right?
Like, so she couldn't marry a divorcee because that wasn't cool, but ended up getting divorced. So yeah, I have a picture here of like her marriage there. And it was interesting because theirs was the first to be broadcast on television. And that did really boost kind of like, it was like a new way to project the image of the United Kingdom out into the world. But yeah, hers was also the first divorce since King Henry VIII.
Yeah.
Which, that's a long time.
Mhm.
Wow.
But maybe that was for the best though, because imagine how many unhappy marriages there were over the course of 500 years.
Mm-hmm.
So she was a trailblazer with that Aries rising and a very exalted chart. So
I do love her crown in this one. I'm like,
I like her
let's
dress.
steal that
It's a
one.
nice dress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, loved it.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll be looking at a couple royal wedding charts to see how they look for them as a couple, but also like what that meant for the nation, because it's an important moment in both aspects, like for the history of the couple, but also how does that's going to impact like the country they rule over. And you can see here, this is Prince Albert and Queen Victoria. They were first cousins, so never forget that.
Which led to a lot of complications in the long term, because Victoria is known for marrying her children to their cousins across Europe, and that led to a lot of complications health-wise, with hemophilia popping up in the family tree and, ending a lot of royal lives very early.
Mm-hmm.
But on a cultural level, she was also the one that inspired the white wedding dress, because prior to that, brides would only wear their best dress to their wedding.
Wow.
And then also, I think Albert introduced the Christmas tree to the UK, because that was actually a German tradition prior to it becoming what it is today.
Interesting.
So,
They also, sent cultural trends for parenting. I put in parentheses for better or worse.
yeah, these two, although they seem to really care for each other, were not known to be the kindest or most loving of parents. And that really did set a trajectory for this family, which is including Queen Elizabeth's too right now, where, it's a little bit cold, it's a little bit harsh, your feelings don't matter. It's really about crown and country and sacrifice and duty. And it might have worked in the 1800s, but I'm not sure if it's working in 2021 and beyond.
Yeah.
No, probably not.
Yeah, I mean, the Victorian era was known, named for her, obviously, and like was this whole thing about how like the importance of family, right? And family traditions and being good parents. And that was like part of their whole like legacy. So it was like important not only for them as a couple, but also for the Victorian era in England, and like what everyone was like supposed to like copy was like what these two were doing. So
They set the standard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The first influencers.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
The very first one.
Pretty much it. So Davison charts. And so in addition to the wedding charts that we're looking at, we're going to be looking at the combined Davison charts for the couple, which combines their date of birth, like synastry almost, but is plotted in space and time, as opposed to just randomly like we do in other composite charts.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, because the Davison chart is like an actual chart, like with a birth time and a birthplace, and not just like a combo of the two charts. Right, Mo?
Yes. And I find that like you can actually apply a lot of like Time Lord techniques to the Davison chart instead of like the composite, where you would literally just look to, I think you would only look at specific transits and you can't read it like a birth chart because it's not really a real chart. But for the Davison, you can actually,
you can progress it, you can perfect it, you can
literally
do zodiacal releasing on it, you can do anything you want, any timing technique you want on it. And so it's pretty interesting.
I think you can do the same with the wedding chart, because that would be also a birthday chart, the day you get married, the time you get married. So for married couples out there who want to look at their wedding charts, definitely try playing around to see if you can see the trends of your marriage against your wedding chart.
It's fun. You can look it up and be like, oh, I know why you're acting like this.
Yeah. So definitely pretty cool.
Yeah, so that's why we just decided to do the Davison, because it was just one that you can actually manipulate and look at.
But you can also use the regular composite too. There's no rules against it. So play around. Yeah. But also there's wedding day electional astrology. This is taken from Leo Whitehorse's website that I love using for this. So when you're picking out a wedding day, you want to have as much luck on your side when starting your new life with your partner. So just some general rules to look at. You want to rule out Mercury, Venus, and Mars being retrograde as much as you can. Also consider the condition of Venus. You want her to be at her best, or at least not in any of her signs of detriment or fall. So try to avoid Scorpio, Aries, and Virgo Venuses if you can. The moon phase is pretty important. You want a chart that has the moon growing in light or waxing rather than waning, because you want energy to grow in your marriage, not to die, right? And you'd like also to have the moon in a good position in signs that she likes versus signs that she doesn't like. Of course, you want to avoid the void course moon, which I think we're going to see a wedding chart where there is one, and we might want to discuss how that's manifested in that chart, because that void moon can also come about as nothing will come of this union, possibly. And of course, you want the moon to be in positive aspects as much as possible. And if you can avoid difficult aspects with malefics of Saturn or the sun, that would be great. Now, even if you do your best, there's no such thing as a perfect wedding chart, right? Even couples who have been together forever might have difficulties in their chart. That's just part of the deal. So try not to get upset if you find things in your wedding chart that you're like, oh no, I have Venus in Virgo. That might work for you and your partner, right? Maybe that's something you're both working on. So don't freak out if you have any of these things in your chart. You guys got together, you got married, you're working with it, you're doing your best. Yep. That's astrology.
I do want to say that, like, in electional astrology, you also have to consider, especially if you do have a rooted chart, like whether that be a horary about, when am I getting married, or like a natal chart like that of yours or your partner. Sometimes planets like Mars or Saturn or the sun say a lot about your relationship. So if you find that in your wedding chart they're really prominent, don't be surprised. It's just you leaning into the planet that's meant to give you that part of your life in your natal promise. So sometimes that does work out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
my little Saturn.
Yeah, my wedding chart is, like, by traditional standards, a disaster. But it's also like hella weird, and that kind of fits like our vibe. So I mean, we got eloped, we didn't like, we eloped and everything, so it's kind of like, yeah, you can see that like in the chart. So and I've been married for 17 years, so there you go. It can work out.
It can work. So don't be discouraged.
No.
Hopefully the charts that we look at today will give us some examples and something to think about. Right?
And even if it's the best chart in the world, it can't help you if if there's like, if you're not willing to work on your relationship, or if one person isn't, like, the best chart in the world can't overcome, the work that two couples do or a couple does together. So
and if you're a couple that really wants it to work, you'll figure out a way.
You'll figure it.
The worst aspects work best for you.
So yeah, don't be afraid.
I will definitely leave a link to Leah's website for you guys so you can take a peek and do your own research. But
yeah, that would be cool. Thank you for adding that. I love it.
Yeah. So I think for the first couple we're going to look at is going to be George VI and Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother.
You can see those old-timey photos here where they were like, don't smile.
I believe they got married in 1923. So we're definitely seeing that style in her wedding dress, the veil as well. At the time of their marriage, they were both still Duke and Duchess.
Yeah, he was the Duke of York.
Duke of York. She married into the family. They thought they were going to lead a very quiet life because he was the second son. He had his elder brother supposed to be king, but we know that history had other plans for this pair. Yes.
So yeah, you can see that drop waist on that wedding gown. I'm so glad. I'm so glad we don't do that anymore.
Drop waist dresses are very specific. Like, I feel like that look only looks good on certain body types, I must say.
Yeah, I'm glad I don't have to worry about that.
No, it is pretty.
So here's the wedding chart. Yeah, you're right, 1923.
Yeah, so they got married on April 26, 1923 at 12 p.m. in Westminster, UK. So they
Oh, this
are.
wedding chart.
Mhm.
So where would you guys like to start with this chart?
One thing I will say is that I think it's interesting that like a lot like Elizabeth, like the product of this marriage, Elizabeth II, current Queen of England. It's
Mhm.
interesting how her spouse and like I think 2 out of 4 of her children have this freaking like chart configuration with like the
Oh yeah.
that Leo rising. So it's really interesting.
A lot of fixity in this chart, and sometimes fixed signs can add to the idea of longevity, right? We're sticking to it. We're not going to break up. We're going to figure out a way. So we have a fixed rising, a fixed sun, Mercury, Jupiter. There's a good amount of fixity in this chart, right?
Yeah. Look at it.
Also, we see right away the moon is waxing. So it's a Taurus sun with the moon in Virgo. So this is a chart where the moon is growing in light towards a full moon. So this wedding was giving a lot of energy to this couple. They're also in similar signs, earth signs, and they're trying to one another. So this might say the bride and groom, the sun and the moon, are actually in harmony with one another.
Yeah, I do want to point out that the moon is like technically receiving the sun by exaltation because the sun is in the moon's exaltation, and then you know, like the moon is in the sun's decan in Virgo. Like there's this nice little relationship between the luminaries going on. And so like if you take the luminaries as being like, you know, not to be like overly gendered, but like the more forward facing spouse, which is like the sun, versus like the more like nurturing supportive spouse, which is the moon. Like that's a nice relationship to have, because it suggests that the person who's taking care of like the material needs and the person who's like trying to embody certain elements of like the relationship and like being like the public face of the relationship, they're like agendas are very similar. So it's really nice and supportive.
Yeah, we're going to see this repeating Sun and Taurus theme too, for sure, over and over again.
We also have Venus in the place of exaltation in this chart. She's at 29 Pisces, so that's pretty good. Venus is in good position. I believe all the planets, the major planets, are forward facing, so no one's retrograde.
Right.
Right. So Mercury,
yeah.
Venus, and Mars are forward facing. That's good.
They're all yeah.
So one thing that I noticed about this chart, and this is something that I've been studying lately, is that we see a lot of middle degrees of the fixed signs in this chart. And those are considered divine avatar gates. So 15 degrees of Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius are pretty sensitive points. They're the halfway point between, I believe, the equinox and solstices, essentially. I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. Yes, between the solstices and equinoxes is the middle point, right? So 15 Taurus is Beltane, 15 Leo is Lammas, 15 Scorpio is Samhain, and 15 Aquarius is Imbolc. These are all traditional, I guess, not pagan, but like traditional points in a way, right?
Yeah.
We see them in the tarot and the world card and in the wheel as well. And it's also in some biblical text. So
is it behind you?
Yeah, it might be behind you. So these middle points tend to be very significant. They tend to bring about transcendence of difficulties, and these planets are able to achieve their highest goals usually, or just become fairly lucky positions. And I've been noticing them a lot in significant entertainment, media, film, whatever, and even with wedding charts. And so what we know about these two, we have Neptune at 15 Leo in this chart, rising. And we have Jupiter at 15 Scorpio in the 4th house. So what we know about this couple is what happened, right? His elder brother abdicated, and these two had to step in and essentially save the monarchy and give it a brand new face. And they were the pair that gave birth to Queen Elizabeth, right? So they were successful. They were able to pull it off by that Jupiter in the 4th house. We will save the monarchy and give birth to kids and, you know, continue the line.
Yeah.
Although
Also,
they married.
Yeah. Also, they had to like take England through World War II, like, and save the homeland fourth house.
Yeah, that's so literal. I also think about the fact that, again, you'll see in some of the later charts that 15 Scorpio especially like
Okay.
gets repeated a lot in some of the individual charts, and I guess some of the couple charts that we look at.
It's interesting. I wonder if that 15 Scorpio is kind of talking about that thinning of the veil that we see at Samhain or Halloween. Because we do know ultimately there was a sudden passing in this marriage too. George did pass away ahead of his time.
Well, you have what, 15 of Libra to 15 of Scorpio is the Via Combusta. And you have an opening and a closing here,
And a
Saturn
closing.
and Jupiter. So that's kind of creepy, actually.
It's interesting that it's Neptune and Jupiter as well that are squaring one another, because I'm thinking about the image they had to put forward. They need to kind of create a brand new kind of celebrity around their family to make this happen, I think. Right? So just something to think about. And as far as the bride and groom, if the moon signifies the bride in this case, I would think that this definitely represents Elizabeth, because she really was a down-to-earth, you know, I think she was raised in Scotland. She had a good family life, versus her husband did not have that dynamic at home. And it does feel like she helped to heal a lot of those issues in the family by actually creating a loving, supportive environment for her spouse. Like she got him those tutoring lessons when he was stuttering, right? Like she was really behind him, like pushing him on.
It's interesting because, you know, if you go with the traditional, like the rising, the ruler of the rising would be the groom, the ruler of the descendant would be the bride, traditionally. I mean, that's based on sort of outdated ideas, but that would make him the sun, which is elevated in this chart, and it would make her Saturn, which is exalted in Libra. And it's often said that she was like the, you know, iron fist and the velvet glove behind the monarchy, sort of propping him up. And you can kind of see that relationship there a little bit, which is interesting, I think.
Yeah, she definitely, I think they said that he wanted to like faint on his coronation day. Like he was so nervous.
Oh yeah.
And she was like just by his side, like kind of propping him up, like we're going to get through this together.
We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it, baby.
I'm glad that you guys brought that up, because I think of how much resonance this has with Prince Philip's chart, because, you know, he is like Neptune on the ascendant at like about this degree. I think he would have been born like not too long after this configuration was like a thing, but I think he was born a couple years before. He was born a couple years before this configuration, and so he has that like moon, Neptune, and the ascendant all in this like middle part of Leo. And I think his midheaven is actually where the sun is in this chart. Like it's either the midheaven or the lot of fortune, one of those. But anyway, like I think about how like Elizabeth, like the second, like I don't think she had a stutter or anything, but she just had a lot of anxiety around giving speeches. And I remember hearing that he would like coach her and like help her prepare and stuff like that. But I think about his like Gemini stellium as well, like kind of feeding into that for her. Yeah.
Anything else about this chart you guys want to point out?
I don't think so.
No, it's a pretty good wedding chart. I mean, they did
Solid.
good.
They did
compared
good.
to other charts.
Yeah, it's not flashy, but it's like stable.
And
which
it
is
did the
what
job.
it needed. Yeah, it did. Like it's not a sports car. It's a Toyota Camry. But it'll be there for 300,000 miles. Okay.
Yes, it definitely did. And it got through a war. It got through abdication. Like this couple was able to weather these storms in a very earthy, solid kind of way, which we do see between them in this chart.
Okay, so let me clear this out. Okay.
Yeah, we learned something new.
You're never too old. You're never too old.
Awesome. So let's take a peek at the Davison chart. What's going on here? Okay. So this is a combination of their two charts in space. So what do we have here?
Okay,
Again, we
so
see those fixed 15, well, at this point it's 16 degrees, but we see it on the MCIC, 16 Scorpio Taurus once more.
Interesting.
So again, their public image and their family life is again kind of these significant points in kind of history in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What else we got?
let me think. So I really like that. I feel like the children being like really a really key part of their legacy is huge, just because like Venus does technically rule the 10th whole sign house and the 5th whole sign house. And so like Venus is co-present with the IC. Venus is like really happy and, you know, a decan she co-rules in Taurus, like,
Oops.
and just using the children to like preserve this legacy feels very
Well,
huge to me.
you can also see the status of the children in there too, because if Elizabeth is the firstborn, she would be the 5th house Venus. And then if Margaret is the secondborn, she would be the Cancer cusp 7th house baby, but she is ruled by the moon in Scorpio. So I kind of think that kind of talks about the two kids, really.
Yeah.
One had a very different life. One is queen and one kind of died early, kind of tragically in a way. Just from, you know, disappointment, sadness, all sorts of rejection and things like that. But she was very popular, I would say. And usually when I see the moon on the MC, I tend to think that someone is doing well in the public eye or received well in the public eye to an extent. And Margaret was beautiful and she had the chart of a queen more so than her own sister. And I think that Scorpio moon must have felt like that disappointment of not being the firstborn.
Yeah.
Right? Denied all the things that she really wanted. That's interesting. What else we got in this chart?
Yeah, looking at that trine between the moon and Mars in the third of like siblings. And I'm like, I wonder if that's like his anger at his own siblings being forced into the role because the moon is conjunct the MC. Just that uncomfortableness with being so visible. Thrust into the spotlight kind of feeling, you know, where you're like, didn't want this.
So in this case, do those rules still apply where the ascendant ruler is the husband and the descendant ruler is the wife, technically?
I don't know if there is, any of those rules for a Davison like that.
Okay. Because I would think if we go by sun and moon, where the sun would be more the groom and the moon would be the bride, I think the sun being down in the 4th house really speaks to George. Him not really wanting to be king.
But it's like it's the sun also in its exaltation. It's like no choice, right?
Like he didn't really have a choice in any of this. Like he was like, but here he was. And then the moon being his wife, you know, it's funny that she almost had, you know, she had a bit of a press war with, I think, Wallace Simpson.
Yeah, she
So
hated
really,
that woman.
Really trying to establish her power and her authority, I think, in a public eye too, might have been the case for them. They really had to salvage the royal family name after the abdication.
Yeah. It's
Anything
interesting chart.
else that we see here? There seems to be a rod in here, but I'm not sure what it means. Between the sun, Neptune, and the MC and the moon.
Oh yeah, okay.
So it's like a hammer of God, a hammer of Thor, nailing that moon and MC in this chart. So
I think
under
really
a lot of
telling,
pressure.
I think it's telling that Mars rules both the luminaries in this chart and like the narratives around like needing to control like what the press thinks. And, like,
were they the first couple to really have to go to war in the press in a way? And kind of create that control dynamic of controlling your image and things that are said about.
Oh, look at that T square between Saturn, Mars, and Pluto. It's really intense.
So that's a fair amount of stress in the chart too. And maybe this speaks to what they had to go through together.
Yeah, and I think of the fact that Mars technically also rules like family, like the private life. And I think like again, like it being in the house of siblings as well, just like this resentment towards Edward for kind of literally fucking off and doing his duties, so to speak, and you know, forcing them to like, I guess, pick up the slack during this period.
Yeah. That sixth house, you know, ultimately George did pass away fairly early. I think he was like, what, 52 years old when he passed away from lung cancer, was it?
Yeah. He was a
and that
very
ruined the
heavy
lungs.
smoker. Yeah.
Yeah, so Pluto in there, I'm sure the work itself was very taxing on both of them, for sure.
Yeah.
But because the bride is in a fixed sign, she lasted till what, 102 years old?
Yeah, I think she was either 102 or 103 or something like that.
She was up there.
That's crazy.
So
yeah.
she stuck around versus the sun in a more cardinal sign was a bit quicker to kind of leave.
Like burnout. So,
and also, yeah, it works, I think. Anything else, ladies, before we move on to the next pair?
I don't think so. I'll clear it out. Let's see who we got.
So this is Elizabeth and Prince Philip. This is the eldest daughter of George and Elizabeth, right? So so when they got married, she was still a princess. Her mom and dad were still alive. They got married soon after the end of World War II. So of course, the country was looking for a celebration after being blitzed to hell and back in World War II, because the UK took a hit in World War II, where, you know, the Axis powers really kind of bombed out a couple of the palaces and things like that. So a royal wedding in the aftermath was something that was probably very uplifting to the country, for sure.
Yeah, they were still suffering during this time. Like Elizabeth had to, like, I guess the palace like had to save up like ration coupons for the material for her dress and for the butter for her wedding cake and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of interesting.
Crazy times, but they did it. And I think Elizabeth was working in the war. She was a driver or a medic driver, was she?
Yeah, she was a mechanic, actually.
Mechanic.
Yeah.
And Philip, I guess, was in service, I believe.
Yeah, he was Navy guy.
So here's their wedding chart.
Oh Lord.
So let's look at our things. So do we have any planets in retrograde? Mercury, Mars, or Venus? I think they're all forward facing.
No, they're all direct.
They're all direct. The moon and the sun, waxing or waning? We have a waxing.
Waxing
moon. Waxing moon, great. Let's see, what else we got going on? And then I think things start to fall apart from there because these two are in a massive grand cross in this chart. So if we're an astrologer, if we had someone there like, I don't know if we want the moon opposite Saturn, Pluto, and Mars and square to the sun. But
well, I mean, so whenever we were like prepping for this episode, I do remember pointing out that technically the moon is received by Saturn. Saturn's not doing so hot. And you know, Saturn's in the 8th house, and we did talk about how he's basically someone who's from this estranged kingdom, like that's no longer functional, and her having to take on a man with lots of baggage. I think in this case, like, yeah, like, you know, I think the moon representing Elizabeth in some way is saying like, hey, I'm willing to do whatever's necessary to get myself in this entanglement, because that last decan of Aquarius like reckons with a lot of those questions.
What we know about Philip is that he was from the Greek
The
monarchy.
Greek-Danish monarchy, yeah.
And I believe his mother was institutionalized. I think she became a nun at some point. And then the father wasn't particularly very warm. And I believe all three of his older sisters ended up married to high-ranking Nazi officials in World War II. So Philip wasn't really walking in with a great resume.
No.
I think they said too, like he came to the marriage with like a suit and a pair of shoes, and that was basically it.
Yeah. Pretty much. He was basically an orphan in a lot of ways. So Elizabeth kind of absorbed him into her family, essentially. But there was a lot of sacrifice. So if the rule still applies, if the ascendant ruler is the groom, he is definitely Saturn between Pluto and Mars.
Oh yeah.
Right?
In detriment.
Detriment. In the house that's a little bit shadowy and difficult.
Yeah, I mean, but look at the mutual reception between the Mars and the Sun. And I really feel like, again, that's like Elizabeth like bringing him in and like giving him a role and like elevating him. But Mars is also like really well placed because it's in its own decan. And, you know, him being a soldier and, you know, giving up everything to like assume this role, this very maybe performative empty role, feels very loud. I think also the Sun representing like things that are owed or old legacies, like, and thinking of that last decan of Scorpio, it's just like basically like having to walk in and have Elizabeth marry him so he could build a new reputation on the ashes of like everything he lost. Feels very symbolic of what this marriage did. Especially like if you think about how everybody talked about him, like when he recently passed earlier this year. Feels very, very symbolic of how I guess this marriage has helped like rehabilitate his image, even though it's not necessarily like he came in like because of things of his own doing, but just because of all the baggage he inherited, like through the circumstances he was dragged through, right?
It's funny that now there's so much conversation about his will.
Oh yeah,
that too.
Yeah, in the eighth.
Sitting in the eighth house between Mars and Pluto, and they're like, you can't see this for 90 years. I'm like, what are you hiding?
To assume there will be a monarchy in 90 years. We'll see about that one.
And all of those Leo planets led by that Scorpio sun. So there's definitely we can't discuss that. It's our business kind of feeling.
And you got that Pluto near the 15-degree mark.
That's right. I didn't even notice that.
Like that's interesting that you guys brought that up, like about the will, because like we're coming up on the nodal return of this chart, like next year.
And of
You're right.
On that sun, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I don't think
27 degrees.
Yeah, because of that Taurus moon, but like there's the follow up of the lunar eclipse that comes like in May next year, where I think the south node is exactly at 23 degrees again. And the eclipses happen at like 25. It's like a 25-degree lunar eclipse in Scorpio. And
yes,
this
pray
time
for
Saturn is
pray for us, pray for us late degree Scorpio suns and Taurus suns.
Yeah, but this time it's like gonna have like Saturn squaring, and Saturn will be hanging out around that moon. And so I think that, you know, the idea that whatever's in that will be concealed for 90 years is a lie. Like it's gonna come out, unfortunately.
I hope so, because I don't want to die not knowing what's in there.
No, we're gonna find out sooner than 90 years. They're crazy.
It's funny though, because now I'm starting to think, is it children that they're hiding? Because it is Leo in that 8th house. So could it be children outside of the marriage they're trying to conceal?
Maybe.
Possibly.
Or lovers even, you know?
Well, we know that he had a lover. What's her name? Penny?
Penny Natchbridge, or yeah. British
Natchbull.
names. Natchbull, thank you.
Miss Penny was the lady that he was living with towards the end of his life. So
His companion.
He was no longer living with Elizabeth. I'm not sure when they decided to live separately, but this chart seems to be, with this grand cross in it. They really had to figure out how to balance the different, conflicts in their marriage and make it work for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mars is definitely a troublemaker in this chart.
Yeah, but I remember we were also talking about both of the benefics in the 12th house, and how like Venus especially is like softening the opposition between that Saturn and the moon, even though like, Saturn is very obligated to the moon and otherwise would help the moon, but like is also just kind of dealing with its own shit. And I remember us talking about how like maybe they had like things behind closed doors that we can't appreciate, that they enjoy, like their hobbies and like stuff like that. I also think about the 12th as like being, animals, like large animals, and because it's like horses and Sagittarius, like don't they like hunt, or at some point they hunted a lot together, or like did a lot of wildlife related stuff together.
Yeah,
so
they're outdoorsy people, but also he's also a foreigner too, technically.
Yeah.
So that 12th house idea of bringing someone in from overseas, in a sense, to be a part of this world.
Yeah.
Anything else about these two? We also have Mars and Saturn in the bends, in between the nodes.
Yeah.
And the sun on the south node as well, and the moon as well. So this is when you have planets in the bends, there's always a lot of decisions to make about how you're going to go up or down the karmic scale, right? So Saturn usually talks about making decisions that you'll be happy with on your deathbed. Like choose the thing that you'll be okay with when you die. Mars is more like using your power or your energy to, either attack or to heal sometimes. And then the moon is also talking about making decisions that are emotional. So I'm wondering how often those things came up and how they've had to balance. Especially with Elizabeth being the queen and him not really having any position. Like I'm sure this is a lot of that 8th house issue, was him not knowing, not having anything.
Yeah.
Not having a sense of destiny or a course of action. And he had to really find his way.
Yeah, I think also like, because just like Venus is easing the opposition between the Saturn, Mars, and the moon, like Uranus is also playing a role too. And I think like being a little more innovative and like, the service projects they were in and stuff like that seems to give an outlet. I'm also noticing the pretty wide but still there opposition between Venus and Uranus. So like maybe having to like maybe play with like different roles of like whose responsibility is what, and like learning how to innovate. It has to do with legacies and, maybe needing to not hold on to certain traditions and allow, Philip to kind of, pass on his legacy, even though there was like resistance from some of the old heads on Elizabeth's side from like, preventing him from doing that. So there's a lot of compromise that definitely had to happen. And I think it speaks to whatever happened with their living arrangements at the end of his life. So, yeah.
Anything about the children in this chart via the 5th house? Being that same Venus as well in Sag.
Problematic ass children.
The children were wild and
wilding.
Okay. Like,
wild centaurs for children, and we've discussed a little bit of them, and 2 of the wildest of their children definitely have Jupiter and Sag, right? So they're
ungovernable.
wild and unruly Sagittarian children. Yes. Well, at least Anne was into horses, as was Charles. I think Anne and Charles are definitely equestrian types.
They were
right?
equestrian types, yeah.
Which is funny. So they channeled their Sagittarius maybe a little better.
Yeah. Versus the Andrew just went wild with sex and drugs and
Mhm.
partying, and then I
And
think the
then-
last born
I think he was
Edward.
into like, wasn't he into like filmmaking and
Yeah.
shit?
he
Yeah.
was.
And so some
Mhm.
people say that the 12th house is the house of filmmaking. So I
Interesting.
think that's pretty symbolic.
Mhm.
Mhm.
You can
Okay.
also see that Neptune there up in the 10th. I think they were pretty good for a long time of projecting an image of themselves and maybe crumbling a little bit. But it did last for a good long time. I mean, they were pretty good at it.
They did it.
Yeah.
They stayed married to the
fixed
end.
moon, that
Mhm.
fixed moon really came through in clutch.
Mhm.
Okay, like
Mhm.
with that.
It may not have been traditional, and I'm assuming that's Uranus's play in this, but they did
Oh,
stay
yeah.
married
They
for what?
did
How many years?
70 something years.
73 or something. Yeah.
Mhm.
It was like 73 or 75. It was a
Mhm.
long time.
It's a
It's a
long.
long time.
You can see why this chart is super duper fixed. It's like, we ain't budging.
Mhm.
We're not breaking up. We're not budging. We're going to figure this out. And they did.
Yeah. Even though the angles are cardinal, it doesn't really matter when all the planets are fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they stuck it out for sure. All right, let's take a peek at their Davison. Okay.
Mm.
Oh, here's the Davison. What
And we
is
got that Scorpio again.
Yeah, the Scorpio
Scorpio.
rising. Look at that Mercury Kazini with the sun in the first house. Like,
we're seeing that fixed degree come up again.
Mhm.
We're seeing that.
We got that
13.
that fixed in C. I
So-
see.
You know, their relationship again, kind of, this was the continuation of Elizabeth's parents solidifying the monarchy again after the abdication.
100%.
So
Mhm.
their marriage lasting and being stable was a huge piece of the House of Windsor still being around today. Now, whether it's going to last beyond them, that's a different story. But, you know, for their 70 years plus of marriage, you know, this chart does speak to, we're here to make things stable. And with a little bit of luck, we're going to make this last.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm thinking because we have that Sag Venus coming back again, like right here.
Mhm.
And it's like pretty close to Antares, like, which is this like intense fixed star that it has themes of like not taking revenge against people who maybe wrong you or slight you, because a lot of these fixed stars, especially the four main royal watcher stars, so there's Antares, there's Regulus, there's Fomalhaut, and there is Aldebaran. And so these stars like usually kind of like pay homage to the trials that monarchs like pre this era had to go through, because back then it wasn't just enough to be like born into the role. You had to achieve some rite of passage. And so this one is about, you know, maybe taking the moral high ground sometimes and not like stooping to the level of people who wrong you, because if you seek revenge, like power will be taken away from you like right away. And so I think about like the fact that this rules like contracts and agreements, but also like 12th house things and like hidden enemies. And I wonder if some of this maps onto their never complain, never explain, like
Yeah. Strategy.
strategy. Yeah. Especially because it's a Venus at the bends as well.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
see.
So Venus is, where is she?
Mhm. Whoops.
All our arrows. It's
I
Mercury
know.
shadow. Leave us alone. There's a lot of
We're
color
having
here.
fun.
We're having fun.
Okay.
We're having fun drawing, okay? I'm just gonna draw up on this.
Yeah, just scribble, scribble, scribble. We're gonna be fine. Okay, yeah. Let's see. I do feel like that Neptune again is doing a lot of work, because there was a fair amount of mystery about them. I remember they had that video they had done recording
that
them,
documentary.
the
Yeah.
documentary about their family. It's never been seen again because they didn't
Literally
want
locked.
to,
It's locked
locked in a
up.
vault because they didn't want to appear too normal, and they needed that sense of prestige and mystery to keep them, you know, kind of
Mhm.
an interesting focal point in the world, especially in the UK, because otherwise, if they're like, you know, everybody else's mom and dad, why are we paying for you to live in castles?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
question.
Don't know. Right.
One
So
thing I don't enjoy is this chart ruler in the freaking 12th.
Mhm. And it's pretty close to Saturn too.
It is
Yeah.
the Saturn Mars conjunction.
Mhm.
And it's interesting how like it's really giving duty, especially because that Saturn is so exalted. And with
Mhm.
Saturn like ruling that IC and the fourth whole sign house, it's just like maybe the whole like the mystery of the family takes precedence, maybe even over like the marriage as a function. And you know, I would imagine that at times like the marriage didn't feel very good, but you know, the commitment to the image was like more important.
Yeah. That's very uncomfortable feeling. Mars and Saturn. And the
Yeah.
12th, it's like, who am I? What's going on? Well, doesn't matter because what you project is more important than who you really are, who you want to be.
well, in this case, if let's just say, let's play around with the idea of the spouses can be represented by the rulers of the ascendant and descendant here.
Mhm.
If this is Philip, then of course Mars and Libra in the 12th house would definitely speak to him, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't have a role, I can't really do much, you know, Saturn is right here, I'm kind of stuck and trying to figure out how to,
Where do I channel this energy, this
Yeah.
Mars? What am I doing with it?
and even getting into trouble because I think he had a couple of affairs as well.
That's rumored. Allegedly. Allegedly. Janelle. Allegedly.
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 Allegedly. You know, so that would speak to the frustration you might have felt about being a consort,
Mhm.
a prince consort, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And not
Mhm.
really having any power or authority.
Yeah, I think he called himself like the world's like biggest like ribbon cutter
Mhm.
with
Yeah,
that
which would keep
Mars
and
is
Libra.
cutting.
I'll cut beautiful ribbons. Me, a
That's
former,
what I
you know,
do.
naval officer, I cut ribbons now, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And it's loosely square to Pluto as well. So there
Yeah.
is probably some frustration about not being able to travel, you know, get away and do anything powerful at all, to be quite frank.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
sorry, Philip. I'm sure it was frustrating, but you figured it out. You did your best. Who's next? Anything else you want to say about this lovely couple?
No, like the children being problematic with,
I mean, they
you know,
again, it's
Jupiter,
problematic.
that combust Jupiter, like maybe doing things that they feel like they could get away with.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It's really showing right now.
Right. The South Node is also in the 5th house here. So a little bit of a
Oh,
loss of
yeah.
energy through the kids and Uranus for disruption.
Mhm.
So shocking
yeah.
things that they would do that would disrupt things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't resonate at all. Sarcasm.
Now, what do you guys think about the square between the sun and the moon here? Something we try to avoid, but if it happens, it's better than no aspect between the sun and the moon, in my opinion.
Mhm.
I agree. And like, you know what? It's a waxing square. And so like, again, there's this careful attention paid towards like the kind of legacy that they want to leave behind for their family. Building a family is really important. But it sucks when, you know, the ways in which that you're supposed to like build a family are supposed to also reflect on you and like your position and your authority. And so, you know, like, I mean, the moon is having a bit of a hard time because the moon is separating. Oh, I think the moon is enclosed by the malefics, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Might be. Yeah. So it's a little rough out here for the moon. Like, being bullied, like in terms of like trying to manage the expectations of maybe Philip or like, you know, the couple in terms of like what they're trying to accomplish, but also like the demands that family and like having a family thing for them, especially because like the moon also rules like the ninth house, has to do with culture and politics and shit like that. And so it's like we have to invite the public into our home, at least, or give the illusion of that, since there is that opposition to Neptune that's really tight, of what our family life is like, so that we can influence public opinion and culture and politics.
So which malefics is she dealing with here?
I mean, she's getting it from everybody, but
What are the main ones you see here?
mainly Mars and Saturn.
Mainly Saturn.
But yeah, she's getting it from everyone. Poor moon.
So even with the trine, that's still difficult.
Yeah, that's rough. I mean, it's not like the Saturn part is a little less rough because like the moon is being received by Saturn, but because Mars is not happy and Mars is also being bullied by Saturn, yeah, it's a little rough for the moon.
It's got to feel really like there's a lot of demands on the moon, you know, like everyone wants a piece of this moon. And it's like, how do I spread like my attention over like everyone who's coming for me? And it's got to be difficult.
But also to protect like the privacy and sanctity of like
the home.
Like,
Okay. Anything else about these two?
No.
Okay. Moving right along. Who's our next couple? Our favorites.
Oh my God. Is she side-eyeing him in this fucking
Yes.
photo?
Oh my gosh. Oh,
He's
man.
like, smile and nod, smile and nod.
So the wedding.
He looks not with it in that photo.
And Diana. Now, if you have been watching any documentary about these two, any TV show about these two, you probably know that their wedding was not a happy one. It was not a happy marriage, but it was significant, right? They got married as well during a difficult period. I think they got married in 1981, I believe.
Yeah.
And this was when Thatcher was in power and I think
Yeah.
Reagan was in power. So we were kind of having this trickle down, you know, bust up the unions, bust up the middle class, bust up everything, and everything was kind of a mess. And these two getting married signified again, the fairy tale coming true. A lot of grandeur and color, but behind the scenes, it wasn't too pleasant.
And it really, like, their wedding definitely revealed a lot of the cracks, I think, starting to really like showcase the not so glamorous side of marrying into the royal family.
Yeah.
It's not all fun and games.
Yeah, and I think this starts to challenge. It would be fun to look at some point how these weddings match up with maybe with Queen Victoria's chart, maybe, because you know she was the beginning of this kind of for duty and you know that kind of stuff, and marrying within the family and maintaining the power. And I'm wondering if their wedding or their period of time was when that was really in conflict with that idea of duty over love and affection. If these two had loved each other, maybe it would have been a different story.
Yeah.
You know? So let's see what's happening on the wedding day check.
I can see where someone was going with this, but I just don't think the execution was great.
The execution was very poor.
All right, so let's go through the list. Are Venus, Mercury, and Mars direct? Yes.
Yes.
Right? Is Venus in a good sign? And Mars in a good sign?
No.
So much. Okay. What about the moon waning or waxing?
Of course.
This moon is definitely waning. And also waning towards an eclipse.
Yeah.
Right. So
it's giving
eclipses are a little bit tricky to get married under because the energy is so volatile. It's not necessarily recommended, in my opinion. So already we got about 3 strikes for not such a great chart. Yeah.
Another thing I want to point out is that Charles and Diana got married during a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, which is a huge deal because Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions are markers of time. And so this was the preview of what the Age of Air had to offer, because up until this point, the mean conjunctions and bodily conjunctions of these 2 planets were mostly happening in Earth signs. And so while the mean conjunction of, so the mathematical conjunction, not the one you can see in the sky, was technically still at the end of Virgo, but the bodily conjunction was actually in Libra. And so this is a big deal because this is like a preview of like the era that we're in now that we just officially started. So yeah, like I feel like whatever was coming out of this relationship, especially around progeny, just because like Saturn rules the 5th, children, also the 4th of like legacies and like, you know, where you come from and family, like is going to be a big deal, like in terms of like what came out of this marriage. Yeah. And you see that now with what, you know, Harry and William are up to respectively, like both trying to put themselves out there. And yeah.
And also the moon was, you know, just leaving a difficult situation with Saturn, and she had just finished up with Mars, but this is just speaking to what Diana was going through.
A lot.
A lot, right? So if Diana represents the moon, she was the Cancer sun. She was definitely the more popular of the 2. The moon is in, you know, sign of her rulership. You know, she's in the public eye next to the MC. So this is definitely Diana, right? And here's Charles, you know, being the sun.
Yeah, it sucks because like they're both like empowered, but they're not talking to each other. They're like in their own worlds. You know, any relationship they have is again through the children, which because the children see both of them, but they don't see each other.
And you can see, the moon near Mars, that sacrificial lamb like going on there.
Yeah.
I would say so.
No, I was just gonna say, like, how do we feel about that Venus ruling the chart?
Well, like technically, like that would be Charles, and if you're going with the ruler of the ascendant. And we already know at this point that he was not faithful to Diana and had a lot of secrets.
I mean, yeah, and I mean, of course, she ended up cheating back, which I mean, any person with a brain would do. Like, so I think it's interesting that they're the only way, like, if you look at them from the 1st house, 7th house perspective, like, they're both not happy. Both are happier somewhere else, like in Diana's case, the public eye, like being a fashion icon, promoting charitable causes, like just seeing like Mars being supported by that moon. Whereas like, yes, like Venus does see the Mercury, but like again, the final dispositor of Mercury is the moon. And, you know, I feel like the 12th house Venus that's fallen in Virgo is just like Charles, like having all these like private affairs and like, you know, being supported in private to have all these affairs. He also seemed just very absent in general.
Checked out.
Checked out, like indeed. And I feel like the sun just like, because just for reference, Charles's ascendant, like in his own chart, is actually where the sun and the north node in that chart are. And like, if you think about his whole brand and the narrative of that first decade of Leo is somebody who's always vying for someone else's position, someone who's competitive. And when I see the sun there, it's like, dude, you're already going to be like king. Why are you competing with people? Why?
Especially your wife.
Yeah, I noticed that,
hunger.
that like the sun near, right? Like, isn't it by Charles's rising? And then the moon is by Diana's MC, right? Or no, the other way.
I think
the
it's
MC
like
is by Diana's moon. Is this chart rooted? Did somebody pick it?
I wonder if someone picked it. So Diana's actually an Aquarius moon. She has a
Oh, okay,
Cancer
yeah.
sun. I think
Cancer
the
sun,
midheaven's
yeah.
close to her sun.
Sun,
Yeah.
okay.
Somebody might have picked this chart, but I wouldn't have
Mhm.
picked this chart.
I wouldn't, but it like when something's that
so
close to like looking like it's almost rooted, I'm like, oh, interesting. Like it's almost like somebody picked it.
tried, and they tried it. I wouldn't have picked this chart.
The astrologer may not have had much
Yeah,
choice.
this
That's
wasn't the
true.
easiest time, because just thinking about how to move the moon around, where would she have been more comfortable in this sky at any
Yeah,
point?
and we were already in eclipse season by
Yeah.
this point, so like it was, yeah, it was a wrap.
Maybe if the moon was in Virgo with Venus, maybe, but
Yeah.
I would
But
go
also
moon in Libra,
they're
but
working with a lot of royal protocol and all that stuff. Like they may have given them, you know, who knows, a 20-minute window and been like, do what you can.
oh my God, is this chart like? This chart is literally like I think a week before Meghan was born.
Mhm.
So I just peeped that. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Barely a week. Yeah.
Barely a week, right?
I will say, if you talk about the children in this chart, I just noticed. So if the firstborn is an Aquarius ruled by Saturn, that would be William, right? We have William here. And I noticed that this Saturn is much more comfortable with the sun, right? And
Yeah.
then Harry would be the Aries cusp baby. And look where Mars is, next to mom.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Here to
Yeah.
step on toes, but like, guess what? Mars has triplicity in Cancer, and like people understand why. You know, when a Cancer or Taurus Mars is provoked, and they seem to be, you know, charging at threats that, you know, don't make sense. I think people understand the reasoning why, as compared to maybe like a Libra Mars, like this transit we're going through right now, where it's just like people are aggy to be aggy.
And then you even see the conflict between the brothers here too, with
Yeah.
Mars being squared to Saturn.
Squared up. It's literally squared up, bro.
Indeed.
Squared up.
Yeah, and I think about the fact that Jupiter rules extended family, and like how the extended family is propping up the older sibling.
Well, Mars is kind of defending the moon in a way, or has a deep emotional attachment to this moon, right? Or just women in general. And I think Harry does seem to be more well received in the public eye than his brother at this point in time. Kind of. It's a little bit fraught. It is still, you know, Mars and Cancer, but at this point, people definitely see him as Diana's child and William as Charles's child.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
definitely interesting. Sometimes it's
throw
real
up the
literal.
Davison. Davison, throw it up.
Oh yeah. You know what's really funny too is that famously Diana took out obey from her wedding vows. And if she's Mars in this chart, I just find that hilarious.
Yeah.
Fallen Mars being like, no, we don't do that here. Sorry. We don't do that. Sorry. No. I just love little coincidences like that.
I agree.
All right. So moving on to the Davison. Okay. So again, let's look at the same signatures. So Venus, Mercury, and Mars are all direct here, right? The sun and the moon, we have a waning situation once again, I believe, right?
Yep.
So I just wanted to say, like, as the last chart, very like cardinally, right? No, hardly any fixed. And then we see another cardinal angle chart here too.
Yeah,
so this is fast.
The indicator of the chart, like the chart ruler, is in the 5th. It is fixed, and so I think again this has to do with like the purpose of literally procreating. Like that's literally all Charles was interested in. Like I don't think he was necessarily like, you know, obsessed or in love. I mean, I think this chart could have worked out nicely if they, you know, Charles wasn't like unfaithful, but there's also the fact that Mercury is like, you know, over here, just chilling out in the 5th, ruling the 12th, no big deal, right? No. Hidden relationships. Anytime you see ruler of the 5th in the 12th, ruler of the 12th in the 5th, ruler of the 7th and the 12th, ruler of the 12th and the 7th, like that's a lot of times, unfortunately, that can be like secret clandestine relationship type energy. And the idea that Charles was not going to have affairs is unfortunately it's not playing out with this chart. Sorry.
I think there was some mention about him saying, well, what kind of Prince of Wales would I be if I didn't have an affair?
Look.
That's true.
Oh, Charles, come on, bro.
I wish that instead, like, because the fact that the 12th house also rules charity and things like that, and it's in the house of the arts. Like, I think if they had done a lot more art patronages together, like, because Charles is a huge aesthete. He loves art and aesthetic. Okay.
He loved dancing.
And I feel like Diana was like reasonably into art and the arts. So I feel like this could have been a great outlet for them. But no, dude had to.
I know that Diana loved dancing. I think she was an accomplished pianist too. There's actually a clip of her, the two of them. I think he played a little something and she played a little something. Like she blew him out the water. And you could just see the
you can't handle it.
Yeah. Resentment. I'm like, this is your wife. Like this, she's giving you so much great, credit and reputation. Like all you have to do is be nice, and he could not manage.
Let's just say Prince Charles was not a wife guy.
No.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mo.
I mean, look at the square between Mars and Venus here. Yeah. So like obviously there is some like attraction, but like again, it's like a Venus in that first decan of Aquarius. It can be a little fickle with its tastes. It might have a very specific way it wants things, and like if it doesn't get it, it's willing to maybe do something sketchy to make it happen. Which is where I come back to affairs, like
because Mars and Taurus wants what it wants, and it's gonna get it.
Yeah. And like Venus is obligated to that Mars, but not necessarily interested in what Mars is doing. And what sucks is that like if they had done a lot more service work together, because there's that exalted Jupiter in Cancer on the midheaven, that would have been great, like especially if it's like health related, involving children, like the arts, like that stuff they could have done really well together, but that didn't happen. So
also, if we go by the idea again, Venus could be representing Charles, so as the ruler of the ascendant, and Mars representing Diana, them being squared again, just that overall conflict, because we're not on the same page. And I think also this Mars in the 8th house, she was kind of isolated and alienated, kind of rejected, and she had to fight really hard to find her place. And I think ultimately she did find it in the arts too, because she's all right, well, I'll just work with children. I'll be a fashionista. I'll do all these things. And what did Charles do? He sulked.
Yeah.
He's kind of resentful about it, And then also the moon, or, I kind of feel like the moon can represent Diana too, as being the bride, being in the Benz. So really,
it's in the Benz.
She was the star of this show, right? Versus Charles being in the 6th house, like she's angular, she's in the Benz, everything revolved around what Diana did. Versus Charles being in the 6th house, kind of, he was the prince, but he wasn't kind of getting the shine that she was. And so again, that resentment. Why am I considered the lesser when I'm the prince? And here she is, angular, and also receiving all this praise and attention,
If he had like put his head down and done his work though, like people would have rewarded him for it. Because
especially
the gift of the 6th house.
Holy shit.
But he did not. And the rest is history. But, you can definitely see that there were some opportunities here for these two to be a couple and a partnership. But like we said, if people aren't interested, Charles was not interested in being that guy. So the whole thing kind of collapsed, very sadly.
Yeah, there's enough like fixity here that it could have if they worked hard, you know. It's a lot more
Yeah.
it's a lot more fixed than their wedding chart. It may have like come through for them if they had been able to like be on the same page and work together. But yeah, there's also a lot of cardinal.
Yeah. So, it happens. So, sadly, Diana did pass away. They divorced. Diana passed away, and the rest is history.
Which is interesting also if you want to take Diana as being Mars in the 8th.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else about these two? I feel sad.
I know.
Sad chart. Sad
I
story.
know. We were thinking of halving it, but did you want to keep going?
Let's keep going.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Let's keep going. We're doing okay on time, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Are we?
We're going faster than I thought we would because I know some of our videos are long.
We're long-winded. What can we say?
What can we say? We have a lot to say.
So Charles and Camilla. So in the aftermath of Diana passing away, a couple of years after, so Diana passed in 1997, and I believe Charles and Camilla married in 2005. So
Yes.
after waiting some time, even though his mother was not into it, Charles did marry his mistress, Miss Camilla Parker Bowles.
35 years after they first met.
35 years. I don't even know what kind of cycle is that. What planet is 35 years?
It's no. It's two Mars synodic cycles and 2 lunar synodic cycles, I think.
Wow.
Close to 2 lunar synodic cycles. So I think it's Mars though. It's Mars.
I think it's Mars. So
yeah.
They finally got together. They had a little civil ceremony. Both of his sons were present. The queen was not. And since then, they have been working diligently to clean up these two's public image, because Charles wants to be king and he wants Camilla to at least be queen consort, I believe.
Yeah, which everyone's like, nah.
Now, Diana is still the people's princess, right? We've seen in both of their wedding charts that she was the moon in Cancer at the top of the chart, and she was the moon in Libra in between the bends. So Diana was always the more popular, I think, between the pair of these two. So will Camilla, I don't think Camilla's ever really been as accepted as Charles has desired her to be. I think there's still a lot of people in the UK and around the world who look at her and she's like, so you're the side girl who was out here torturing his wife while they were married, and now you want us to accept her. We don't know if that's going to go over as well. Times have changed, but not that much.
It's interesting to note that she's never chosen to use the Princess of Wales title, which she is technically entitled to. So, I mean, they know that would not go over well since that was Diana's title when, she passed. So,
I don't know. I would not advise for that. I'm not sure if there'll ever be another Princess of Wales, to be quite honest. We'll see. It might not happen. Diana might be the last. And we should probably, at some point in time, we might have to examine that Princess and Prince of Wales chart and see.
For sure, because it's interesting. It's like a curse seat.
It's a little bit of a curse situation, and we can see it happening over the course of many years. The people who are in those positions do not always do very well. So yeah,
out of like all the people that have had Princess of Wales titles, it's something like 60 to 70% something awful like happened to them. Yeah. And you're like, oh damn.
Maybe Wales isn't interested in the prince or princess.
Maybe you should give it back.
Maybe you should give it back.
Give it back.
All right. So
stop playing with these people.
Things change. So let's look at their chart. So first things first, who is retrograde and who is direct? We do have a Mercury retrograde in this chart. Mars is direct, Venus is direct, but Venus is not in a house
Problematic.
and a sign that she appreciates being in.
That's problematic.
That's probably your exes. At least the sun and the moon are in the same sign, and it is waxing, right? She is
Yes.
growing in light, and I believe that the wedding was delayed because who had passed away?
Pope John Paul II
had passed away, so they said we'll wait a day and have it the next day or something.
Yeah,
like
because
that.
Charles had to go to the funeral.
So that might have been a blessing in disguise, because the day before, I think the moon was still waning.
I mean, look, the sun is also the chart ruler, is in its joy. It's doing pretty hot. Yeah, like the chart is also extremely cardinal, meaning that like, and because it's like happening on the nodal axis, like it's giving me the impression that like they've wanted to do this forever, and like they just decided to say, fuck it, we're gonna do it now. Like,
yeah. Is that Saturn near Camilla's placements at all?
let me check, because she has a huge Cancer
She's a
stellium.
huge Cancer 12th house stellium, right?
Yep.
It's just
Let me
interesting
see.
because if she's the bride, she's represented by Saturn. And
Yes,
that's in Cancer.
the Saturn is on her sun and a lot of fortune conjunction.
Just saying.
So
It's her. Yeah.
the groom being Charles at 19 Aries as a sun, and Camilla being 20 Cancer as Saturn, they are square to each other, but they are aspects. So
at least they're talking.
They are talking.
They're talking.
And this might be the fact that their relationship as secret partners or secret lovers for so many years, that 12th house dynamic is a big part of their wedding, their marriage, right?
It's also probably a huge part of their dynamic. Yeah.
Right. So I do think there might be people behind the scenes who aren't really thrilled about this situation.
Yeah.
So the sixth house.
But Saturn's in its joy, and I've joked that Saturn in its joy, regardless of dignity, because I've seen a couple of like 12th house Saturn in Leo or 12th house Saturn in Cancer charts, where the people in question get to evade accountability. So I joke that, especially if it's Saturn in the 12th in a date chart, like that's the evade accountability Saturn placement. Like,
it's the Teflon. It just slides off.
The more dignified, the better. Like, so yeah.
Yeah, Saturn's not especially dignified, but it's in its joy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Saturn joy is in the 12th house. All right. Okay.
It is received by the moon.
Also
too.
joy in the 9th as well.
The sun is in its joy, yeah.
It's like, you know, this chart is secretly better than it looks.
It is. It's secretly better than it looks.
And they're both in their joy. So it's kind of like they're both thrilled about this. Thrilled, right?
I'd
Yeah.
say so.
I think it's also interesting that this wedding takes place, like, I think a few days or a week after like the Venus star point conjunction in Aries. So that feels like a huge turning point in the Venus cycle as well. Like,
a fresh start.
Fresh start.
A little bit childish too. Like this feels like, you know, oh, we might have broken a couple of things or broken a couple of people, but we deserve to be together.
Yeah. I really like that Venus is also in her own decan in Aries. So this is very much like the symbolic celebration of something. Even though we know that there's like a lot of like hard battles to win after this. It's like, let's celebrate even though like the real work hasn't started yet.
Would you guys consider the 7th house as the public? Like the people they have? Okay. So, you know, Mars is still in that 7th house, as is Neptune. So I do think there is some confusion maybe, and maybe some anger as well still. Like people are like I don't know.
Are you doing this? Really?
Like people are like, like they want to let it go. And then it's also
is this an eclipse wedding? I just realized that.
Oh,
this is an eclipse wedding. Holy shit.
Wow. I didn't even see that.
I just realized that. Look. Shit,
so
right
a couple of hours before there would have been an eclipse, a new moon eclipse.
Damn,
Okay.
this is an eclipse wedding. Okay, well,
Well, we're gonna have to wait and see what happens when we have another eclipse in Aries Libra with these two.
big no.
Look at Mo.
Don't do that. No, I mean, but again, this is probably likely just like them kind of getting shoved into this circumstance, because this would have been like, because they both technically, I think they both have Aries midheavens, like even though they're both Leo rising, so this would have been like an angular transit for both of them. So I feel like, given that the North Node would have been hanging out around the place where both of their midheavens are, this is probably just them being shoved into like bullshit. Like, I doubt they were like, let's like plan a wedding on an eclipse, but it just happened, right? So I think that this speaks to maybe the fatedness of their union, especially if they were getting together after like 35 years of knowing each other, right? So yeah.
Was that the Mars in the 7th? Did you say that was like 2 Mars cycles?
Yeah, it's about
Mars
2
in the
Mars
7th
cycles
going like,
because-
hey, finally, we're in the 7th.
Yeah, because every 17 years, Mars goes retrograde in about the same place in the zodiac. So that's why I say it's about like
Yeah.
a Mars cycle.
Yeah.
2 Mars cycles, sorry. Yeah.
Okay. We'll have to find their first meeting chart if we can.
Yeah, if we can find it. I hope we
Yeah.
can find it.
Someplace in the 60s, I think they explained that. And then we have Jupiter down here in the 3rd. I mean, is that a blessing? I guess. On the South Node? I feel like they have some debts to pay off in a way. Because when
Yeah.
Jupiter is on the South Node, is more like, you know, this is not for your self-aggrandizement. You have to give of yourself in some way. You know, and I wonder if they've decided to do that. I don't know. Maybe not. I don't think so. But what do I know? I don't know. Like, they're such an interesting couple. I don't know what to make of them, to be quite frank. Because there's so much just negative charge around them for all the years that they made another person completely miserable. Yeah, so it's kind of hard to feel like, okay, I guess you're happy now. Like, she's dead. Like, like, she doesn't get to enjoy her golden years, and you two here are kind of frolicking. So I feel like that's always the underlying situation for them.
Yeah, I also think that like that's also like the people who helped them get where they are celebrating with them, low key.
They're friends.
Low key. Yeah.
Is Saturn at the bends or close enough?
Yeah,
Yes, it
it's
is.
pretty close.
Yeah, pretty
It's
close.
there. I'd give it to that.
Yeah. If that's her, then, you know, it's interesting. Like, I think you were saying Janelle was about making a choice. This is like her second chance at a choice, right? Because the first time she like did not marry Charles and was not like, you know, she married someone else. It's interesting. It's another go around.
So hopefully on her deathbed, she likes this decision she made. I hope it's worth it, girl, because woof.
Woof, indeed.
Let's see their Davison chart. What a story. Like, the history books already.
Get them going. Start firing
Okay,
up the
who
presses.
is this? I put the wrong people in here. See, look, Diana said no.
No, Diana.
Oh my
And
god.
both of us, we looked over this several times.
did.
So,
Oh no.
oh
That's
well,
so funny.
girl. That's so funny. Diana's like, actually, no.
I was
No,
looking at it and I was like, wait, this looks real familiar.
Mercury retrograde, guys. We apologize. So we might have to come back to these two. But I think that's really telling that even
I think it's a sign.
it's
Yeah.
a sign that Diana's like, actually, don't talk about them.
Actually, don't. We don't want to know.
We want to know, but we'll come back to them another time. All right. All right.
More modern times.
William and Catherine. All right. So after the tragic death of Princess Diana, you know, the public was very much invested in the happiness of her two sons, William and Harry, right? Especially after they knew that she wasn't particularly happy in her own wedding or her own marriage. So when William got married to Catherine, it seemed to really reinforce this idea of the fairy tale and the House of Windsor coming up again, and a new generation bringing fresh blood and fresh life into the monarchy. Was it true? I don't know. But a lot of people watched, and people were very happy. And
I did like her dress.
I remember watching this wedding early in the morning and just been a little bit bored, I will say.
Yeah.
And I tried to follow them afterwards, and I just didn't find them very engaging. So I didn't really, I think I watched their American tour, and I was like, okay, well, that's it. I'm done.
Well, I mean, what was I doing? I was in high school. I think
Oh
I was
my
in,
God.
like,
Shut up.
I was in the English class when it was on. And like my teacher at the time, she was like, let's watch this instead of doing like real work. And everyone's like, okay, sure. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if it was also just like the channel we were watching, because I think we were watching it on ABC. And I guess like the streaming just didn't, like, I remember you guys telling me about, like, yeah, they had like dead trees and shit. And it's like, I don't remember that. Maybe they just did a good job of like making it look nicer than it was.
It was definitely a society wedding, right? It was very much by the book. It was very much like, regular. It wasn't very joyful, in my opinion, when I was watching it. In terms of the trees, I think it was because it was a cold spring or something like that.
Yeah, it was a cold spring. I remember that spring.
Either the blooms, either they fell off or they did not bud in time for the wedding. I can't remember. So if you look at the wedding video, you'll see her walking down the aisle with these trees on either side, but those trees were supposed to be flowering. They were not. So I remember looking at the trees like, what are these doing here? Like, this is an odd decoration choice. They were meant to be flowering. So I don't know if that's a sign of anything, but we're astrologers. Everything's a sign.
Everything is a sign.
No such thing as a coincidence for us. So let's see what their wedding chart looks like.
Yeah, because you have to, or just remember it's right near Beltane as well. So it should have been flowering. That's like, May Day, fertility, all that kind of stuff.
So let's see. Do we have any retrograde planets in this chart with Venus, Mars, or Mercury? I think everyone is direct.
Everybody's direct.
Okay. So we see that Venus is not very happy in Aries, right?
The moon is void.
The moon is void course. So this is the first wedding chart where the moon is void of course. The last aspect that she made was to who? Was it Pluto?
No, I think it was the sun.
The day before the moon was an aspect to the sun, and after that she went on her own, not talking to anybody. Now I wonder if this is talking about Kate, because Kate is actually a commoner by birth, right? She is not an aristocrat. She comes from a middle class background, and so to me it kind of talks about the fact that she is not really a part of this world. Right?
That could be it. I also think about, like, especially if we take sun and moon as like the different parties, like definitely she was not a part of this world. I think it's also telling that Venus is technically contra Antisha, like the moon, and so is Uranus. Like those are the tightest like contra Antisha aspects, and it's almost like there's this like background shedding of maybe some of those like ties. And
so can you explain some of the contra Antisha elements to those who are listening?
So contra Antisha is the opposite of Antisha, which is a relationship between signs that share the same amount of light relative to the solstice points. So the signs that are Antisha to one another are Cancer and Gemini, then you have Leo and Taurus, Virgo and Aries, Pisces and Libra, and then Scorpio, Aquarius, and then finally Capricorn and Sagittarius. Now the inverse is like they have opposite inverted dark light relationships, and this is relative to the equinox. So that's what contra Antisha is. And so in the case of Contra Antisha, it would be Libra, Virgo, Leo, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Cancer, Capricorn, and Gemini, Aquarius, and Taurus, and then finally Aries and Pisces. So there you go. And yeah, I don't know, like, so Contra Antisha are supposed to act like shadow oppositions, and so there's just a hidden tension or opposition. Yeah.
So maybe her social role or her values were different from everybody else's.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I'm curious because I wonder what you guys think of, you know, the sun representing, why am I doing the stamp again? My bad. I meant to do the circle. The sun being William, and, you know, take Kate as this Saturn. And I think about, like, remember the Queen Mother's chart and Elizabeth's father's chart, like their wedding chart had a similar, like, I think the sun was in Taurus as well. Saturn's also in similar degrees in what's it called? Libra, exalted. It's a very happy Saturn. And like I do know that there's a lot of themes of like Kate having the more functional, happy family life. That seems to be repeating itself again. Just because like the moon and the sun are just like they've already separated from talking. Like at least in the other chart, the sun and moon had this application going on, and it was a tight aspect. We don't see that in this chart. And so, you know, while they've been trying to brand like Kate and her family as being the happy family that William never had, like I don't know if that's going to be as effective in this particular setup.
They do sell that quite a bit, that Carol is the mother he never had. And I'm like, what?
He had a mom.
He had a mom. We all know who his mother was. And we're fairly sure that for all of her flaws, she did try to be a decent mother to him. So that always rankles me when they try to insert Carol as this new mother figure for him. And I'm like, don't do that.
Yeah,
you could be a mother-in-law and respect his mother.
There's this Pluto, Saturn, Venus, T-square nonsense going on. So I think, again, like this might be a marriage that's about maybe cementing power or something like that. Stability.
Continuing the authority of the monarchy.
But look at how cardinal this chart is. This chart is so, like, the only thing that's fixed, like if you ignore the outers of the nodes and the angles, like, I mean, sure, the sun is fixed, but like everything else is like cardinal.
So cardinal tends to be very quick, mutable tends to change, and again, fixed signer, stick to it. So only the sun and the angles are stick to it in this chart.
Everything else is like cardinal as hell.
Okay. What else can we say about this chart? The sun and the moon aren't really talking anymore. Like that's a big deal. What else?
Moon, like void of course, is like interesting because it's like, it doesn't mean nothing to stop it, or does it mean nothing to come of it? That's the interesting thing.
They've had children. They've been married for what, 10 years now? Yes, they've made their 10-year anniversary. It's not so much that nothing has come from it, but maybe it's not a real relationship that has life to it, right? Because this is a fading moon. This is fading towards a new moon. This light is fading.
I mean, look at the fact that the moon is also at the bendings. Like,
yeah,
that's right. Yes, she is at the bendings.
And she's at the south bending, like applying to the south node. Like I think there are questions about like, do I stay with this the long haul? And like the moon is in that last decan of Pisces, which is all about illusions and sacrifices, and you know, the sacrifices you're willing to make or not make to preserve some kind of illusion. And so I think that this being the backdrop of their whole relationship is like just indicated by that moon. And I think that, you know, whether they stay together or not, like it's not going to be like a quick decision. It's going to be this gradual, dragged out, like
Mm.
back and forth, you know, like
Mhm.
he was even kind of waffly with her. Like he
Yeah.
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
want to marry her
For
at one
years.
point, and then
For years. So the
changed his
story
mind,
is,
and
yeah, that this is a many years in the making situation,
Mhm.
where it seems like Kate was intentionally put in William's path by her mother, you know, to essentially snag a prince. She, I think, went to the same school with him to the point where she had gotten into a better university, but ended up switching to his university to be near him, and just was constantly being put into his orbit until finally he kind of, in a way, was kind of worn down, I guess, because I think William was dating other people, might have been interested in other people for a bride, but they were not interested in being his bride. So Kate was kind of the last lady standing, which I think
yeah,
would make sense. Like in the eighth
yeah.
house, she's like, "It's me," and he's like, "Okay."
It's also
That
a
eighth house
balsamic
feeling
moon.
projection. Mhm.
It's a balsamic moon too. It's like there's this wearing down almost. Um,
Reminds me of
Almost like
Steve
you're
Urkel.
like kind of like dragging someone to the finish line. It has that kind of quality of like it's gonna happen, but it's like we're really pulling it out here. Like it's
Yeah,
gonna
I
take
think-
everything we
Yeah.
got.
I think there was some talk about towards around the time they got engaged, there was definitely a conversation with William about, you know, either shit or get off the pot. Like either you're gonna marry her or you're gonna find someone else. And I think he was just like, all right, I'll marry her. So, and they were together for what, 9 years prior, or
almost 10. Almost 10.
together for about 9-10 years, off and on dating.
Mhm.
And then at this point together 10 years as a married couple.
Mhm.
They have their kids, right? We have that
Mhm.
really nice Jupiter fifth house, and we have
Yeah.
the North Node in there, right?
And we have the
Mhm.
Jupiter-Mars conjunction with Mars in its own domicile, Jupiter in its own decan. There's a lot of
Mhm.
propaganda around like the children and like, oh, they're such great parents, and like, oh, this, oh, that.
I
you
think it
know,
also
like-
speaks to her experiences of being pregnant. She always got horribly, horribly, violently ill to the point where she'd have to
no,
be
that-
hospitalized. And I think that's that Jupiter Mars conjunction. Interestingly, I think
Yeah.
that Jupiter Mars conjunction is the ascendant of the William the Conqueror chart, like that ascendant degree.
Oh wow.
Interesting.
So the 1066 William the Conqueror chart is a 21
Mm.
degree Aries rising.
You're right. I remember that. You're
Mhm.
right. It's true.
Interesting. So there's definitely a historical connection to this, right? Continuing this line.
Mhm.
Uh,
You also
anything
see the
else?
Pluto again. Saturn square Pluto.
Yeah.
Oh shit, you're right.
Mhm.
I want to see the Davison.
Okay.
Show me the Davison.
Here we go.
Hmm.
So at least this is a bit better because at least the moon is waxing now. And she's in her own sign and she's on the North Node with the IC in the second house, which is really interesting.
Hmm.
So Kate looks a little bit better in this chart and she's represented by the moon, but they are still square to one another. So
Yeah.
at least they're talking to each other, but it's not necessarily the nicest of conversations.
Mhm.
Yes, you have elevated entitled sun versus newly landed elevated moon. You know, like, so I think this does a lot for her image. It does help his image a lot too.
Mhm.
What's interesting is they're both Cancer moons, which is really funny. So
And
Yeah.
born on the eclipses, the two of them. Him
they're
on
both
the new moon
eclipses.
and she on the
Yeah.
full moon, right?
Only
Mhm,
like
yeah.
the only fixed anything in this chart is Venus, right?
Yes.
Everything is cardinal or
No, Jupiter.
mutable.
Jupiter too.
Oh,
We have a
Jupiter. You're right.
So Jupiter rules
Uh,
rules her. So she's a little bit more interested in keeping things going. And
He's-
He's
a
not.
little bit more unstable.
Notice how Mercury is fresh out of detriment in
Mhm.
this chart. fresh out of its detriment and fall in this chart. So
Zero,
like,
zero.
something about this union has like put him in a position to, I guess, maybe put some wind in his sails to like get out there,
Mhm.
right?
So start
Well,
himself
like-
and be his own man.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it's not until they get married that they get like their title, right? And then they get an office and like more of their own money. So like he was made Duke of Cambridge, he got his own press office, he like was kind of putting himself out there. It's really interesting that in 20, whatever, you'd have to like wait until you get married to like actually be your own person. But I guess
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, what do you guys think of the sun, like that really tight sun Mars opposition? Because that's a very retrograde Mars that's not happy in Libra,
Mhm.
opposite the sun of this chart. And I think about the fact that, the sun, even though it's exalted, like its lord is not doing really hot at all. And it's actually in a T square with the moon as well. And so I feel like
Yeah.
I would say the press is kind of like the 11th house. The press is interested in his like children, his love life, things like that. And, I feel like all the pressure falls on Kate to like basically hold together William's image, right?
It's interesting too that this Mars is in control of their sixth house too, their work. And now there's a lot of questions about what they've actually done over the last 10 years of their relationship. Like, what are their projects? What is their legacy? Like, what have they been doing with their time? Because they don't really seem to work, right? Like,
Do you think that's the Saturn at the bendings issue, maybe?
Saturn at the bendings? Possibly.
Like an exalted
Yeah,
Saturn?
no, that's also because it's like you have all these resources and like people are pouring all this shit into you. Why do we still care? Like,
Possibly. And that Saturn is in control of their eighth house and their ninth house. So is the investment being well used, right? People are pouring money into them. And then also with this ninth house, like how are they being received by the world, their image on the world stage? Are they, able to go to international diplomats? Are they good at the job, right? Because if they're going to be king and queen one day, that's part of the job, being able to converse with diplomats and world leaders and actually be useful. So is there something to be said about an exalted planet kind of being lazy?
Oh yeah.
yes, especially
we
in
call them
maltreated.
when they call them basic.
Look, and this is a very maltreated Saturn, like Mars. And I feel like, again, like something about like the work that they're actually doing, the groups that they align with too, like the press can really like do a number on their image and like, their legacy. And I think that the Saturn also speaks to what they have to pass on to their children. And so, I mean, Saturn's at its max exaltation right here. Like Saturn's doing pretty hot, but Mars is really close and it's rough. And like,
It's
I think
almost like
interesting
somebody
that-
like breathing on your neck, right?
Yes, and like,
Come
oh
behind you.
wow, think about siblings in this chart too, like maybe sibling envy, because there's the whole like, oh, my sibling's getting all this attention, like now I have to like come and catch up or whatever. And
so you're saying sibling in terms of the third house sibling
Yeah.
being the sun?
yeah,
Okay.
Just like staring down at your exalted Saturn.
yeah, like squaring off and like feeling like you have to work a little harder, maybe. I don't know. But again, I was saying to both Janelle and Kelli that I think that there's this element of the relationship that's very power and resource driven rather than like full on romantic. It's giving pact or agreement.
I mean, this
especially
chart
with
doesn't
the-
really jump out as
Romantic.
romantic. There's a lot of T squares, and then also both of them, if we consider them both being ruled, him as Mercury, the ruler of the ascendant, and her as Jupiter, the ruler of the descendant, they're both ruled by this Mars, right?
Mhm.
And this is an unhappy Mars.
Mhm.
So,
but it's also I don't know, what do you say, like a strategic Mars, right?
It is a
Mm-hmm.
strategic Mars.
When you like think of Mars in Libra, I think of like,
Very
how
strategic.
are you going to like move chess pieces around on a board to like, get ahead, because you're not especially empowered to like, fight with your fists maybe. So you're fighting with, your head.
Yeah.
Air sign,
No,
all that.
that's a good phrase. And I feel like, with the Mars having such proximity to that Saturn, it's just relying on these hidden networks and influence to like help you do your dirty work almost. So, and some of those
Boy.
are political figureheads because I'm thinking of the fact that the dispositor Venus is in the 9th house and like is trying this what's it called, this Pluto, but there's this nice mutual reception between Saturn and Venus. So there's this element of like having this strategic sort of approach to things and like trying to inform, I guess.
And Venus rules the 12th too.
Oh wow, you're right. Yeah.
She rules the 12th and the 5th. Okay, and using the children as a strategy piece as well. Right. So already George and Charlotte are kind of being trotted out on tour, kind of pictures and doing certain things. Louis, like their pictures are being kind of sold to the press in like calendar form, like what do they call them? Katie's cuties. And I was just like, what? Like, so they're really kind of marketing the children more than I think any of the royal children have been marketed before.
I really hope that doesn't backfire with Mars there.
It probably will, quite frankly.
And Pluto. I was like, oh yeah, and Pluto.
I mean, also you guys are gonna like, this might be a bit spicy for this.
Just put allegedly in front of it.
Allegedly. Now, whenever you have Saturn in the 5th house, Saturn can be a general significator of other people's children. When the Lord of the 11th is in the 5th house, other people's children. That's all I'm going to say. And that's both indicators are in their 5th right now. That's all I'm going to say about that.
You do the math.
There's possibilities that there could be love children out of this union where people have stepped out and had children outside. And recently there has been a bit of a scrubbing of somebody else's child from the internet because of their connection to William. So how long that will stay private, we don't think for very long. So unfortunately, those are things. Now, I think when we were talking about these charts, we were trying to figure out if we could counsel a chart like this, what would be our advice to make the best out of this chart? Because, not everyone has an amazing Davison or wedding chart, so you have to make do. So what would we advise this couple to do to make the best of this relationship?
Work. They need to do sports and work. Yes, do work, do sports. Athleticism.
Well, Kate is great at sports. Every time she's in a sport-related thing, she actually does really, really well, and she seems to shine. William a little bit less, I think. I think Kate is a little bit looser, but I don't know.
She's like a 6th house stellium, of course. Like, of course. Like, her in sports, they need to be doing more of that because I think that them doing, and I feel like it was a good idea to give them sports patronages. Because I feel like they could actually do a lot more with that. Obviously, I would trust these people to invest my money because a lot of the indicators of resources are doing pretty hot in this chart.
So the moon being in its own house in Cancer,
and
next to the
exalted.
Right? Exalted.
I'm sorry, dignified, and then the 8th house ruler being exalted. Like that's
Saturn.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah, and kind of, by sign trying to Venus, right?
Yes, with mutual reception. So I would trust these people to, like, if they were doing more with like finances and resource management. Totally
or like funding like colleges with that nice little trine to Venus. Like they should be out there like There should be William and Catherine College of blah blah for sure.
Yeah, they should like also, try to get like kids who don't have opportunities to study, like
Scholarships.
or literally build schools like
Sure.
below Saturn. Like, and in the Vedic system, the fifth house is education. So like Saturn exalted there, they should be doing that. Like, I don't know. Like, I would tell them to do that.
Especially because they have such a big story about them meeting at school, and I think recently they went back to their alma mater to like have their anniversary, something.
Yeah,
so
in St. Andrews.
St. Andrews, and maybe making an art scholarship or a sports scholarship, something like that.
They should do it.
Okay.
Hey, people, if you're William and Kate's astrologer, tell them to do it.
Tell them to do it.
Seriously, I'm serious. It would go well for them, I think. And like, what better timing with Jupiter like rolling over the Venus
over that
chart
Venus,
right
yeah.
now. Like,
they really should be unrolling, something educational in nature. And I know that Kate did have that early education thing, but nothing came from it.
It was not a well put together project, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that has been the main issue with their marriage now. As they're 10 years in, people are really asking, what have you been doing? Because there's nothing to show at this point. And this was definitely exacerbated by the next couple that we're going to be looking at, who came on the scene and kind of made their lack of activity seem a lot more glaring. And here they are, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. So we know that Harry was a longtime bachelor. He served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He had been doing a lot of charity work, building his own charities. He did put together the Invictus Games. He put together the Santa Bali charity in honor of his mother with the Prince of Lesotho, I believe, to help children who are orphaned by AIDS and HIV. So Harry's been a working ass Virgo for the majority of his life, right? And then he meets Meghan Markle, who as well, a working woman, built her own career in TV, did a TV show, had her own, lifestyle blog, was doing humanitarian work, was working with the UN, has gone to college. Like, Meghan was already someone who had a whole life of her own, made her own millions. And so these two met later in their 30s and sparks flew and they got married, right? And to be quite honest, when they got married, I think it was really a wonderful celebration, not just for the UK, but for the world, because, Meghan is also American, right? So this is a different kind of foreigner moving into the family. She's not European. She is American, and she's also biracial, her mother being African-American and her father being who he is.
I was about to say a POS.
Her father being who he is. Don't know if he can take much credit for Meghan being who she is, but yeah. So the wedding was very much a beautiful affair. It was very entertaining. Beautiful music, just enjoyable. I have watched that wedding at least 2 or 3 times because it was actually a lot of fun to watch. I was completely entertained.
And a great sermon. Loved it.
Girl, I love that sermon. A little bit long. And I didn't really mind it, but I was more uncomfortable by the people there being uncomfortable. So
that's their problem. I thought it was great.
I thought it was great, but I was just like, ugh. There were certain things at the wedding that even the day of we were noticing, like, although these two are completely in love and it's obvious, there are certain people in the audience that are not as supportive as I would like to see for
the stank faces.
The stank faces, people wearing white to the wedding and calling it pale yellow. Like, I was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
I saw her dress. I was like, is she wearing white?
It filmed as white on screen.
Filmed as white. I thought that shit was white, and I remember being pissed. I remember I was
and we're talking about Catherine.
We're talking about Kate Middleton, man. So I remember leaning over and being like, is she wearing white?
Yeah, I had a lot of questions.
Also, his side of the family did not look up when they were taking their vows.
Nope.
So I was not pleased about that either. And of course, later on, we know there was more to this seeming cold shoulder behavior at the wedding. So
That being said,
beautiful day, beautiful dress, beautiful thing, but there was some underlying crunchies in the mix.
it wasn't pretty.
So what is going on in this chart? So who is direct? Venus is direct, Mercury is direct, Mars is direct. That's great, right?
We love it. We love it. Look at all that Taurus as a
all that- we got
Taurus.
some
I love
Mars
it.
technically like isn't Mars technically like no, Mars isn't stationary yet.
He's not
Not yet.
stationary yet. I don't
No,
think so.
but just remember Uranus just ingressed, I think like about
You're
3
right.
days before.
Uranus just moved into Taurus, so this was a big deal, and it definitely flavors their whole chart, their whole
Let's
energy.
shake it up, shake it up, shake
Get
it
up,
up.
girl. Them getting together was a big
It's a big
smash
deal.
to the
And
I
it's
guess
square
the monarchy.
Mars in the 7th, so you can see that people were not happy. You could just see it.
Yeah.
It's right there. Mars square Uranus.
And also Mars being the ruler of the 4th house. So
guess who's
kind of
not
giving the
happy?
story, the
Yes.
family
The
was
family.
not pleased.
The
family
shady
were
family like
open enemies.
sabotaging.
We have a lot of feelings about this, and also the press, because the 9th house is ruled by that Mars too. So who was the open enemies of these two? The family and the international press, most of the UK press, as we can see. Also, Chiron is there in that 9th house. So we're already seeing kind of a picture of the story starting to play out here.
Yep.
But aside from that, the moon and the sun are together. They are in a nice sextile. Waxing
I think
in
this is
light.
the first nice sun moon aspect we've seen.
Aside from Elizabeth and George.
Right. The very
Yes.
first one and the very last one. Everyone else either had no talkie or they had a square, right?
Some squares and some, yeah. So this is gorgeous. And the moon, even though she's in the 12th house in this particular chart, at least when the wedding started, by the time she took her vows, the moon had moved into the 11th house, and this turned into a Virgo rising chart. So it's a little bit tricky. It's kind of hard to know which chart to use for them. And also we know that they had taken their vows about 3 days beforehand or so.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, it's not the legal vows, but I don't know. Who knows?
We don't know for sure. And in that chart, the moon would have been in Gemini, which is representative of Archie and Lily Diana. I think they
and
both
I'm just a shout out. This is my birthday. So of
Oh.
course it's a great chart.
It is a great chart. Now this chart is also the day that Anne Boleyn lost her head. So there's also that. They were kind of pushing that out into the girl. They were really trying to smear this wedding ahead of time. And some of that is coming out into the public eye as well. Currently, we're hearing more about how the wedding was kind of sabotaged or attempted sabotage.
Yeah, as we're like recording this, we're like 1 day out from Thomas Markle, Meghan's father, naming names as to who was manipulating things behind the scenes to stop the wedding. So interesting. Allegedly.
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 Allegedly in capital letters.
So we're definitely seeing the family and the press in cahoots to sabotage, right? So we
see you see the moon opposite Pluto in this chart. So yeah.
So if Meghan is represented by the moon, she is in for some trouble to an extent, because she does have to get past, she gets a little bit past Saturn, and then she has to get past Mars and the South Node as well. And so we do know that she was the focal point of a lot of the aggression and the attacks. And it did get pretty serious for her. But thankfully, the groom, Harry, as the sun in Taurus, was faithful, he was steady, and he supported her and moved her to greener, safer pastures, right? So there's a lot in this chart that we now know. We've seen it play out, right? What else?
I always kind of look at that Venus in Gemini at the very, almost very last second. And I just kind of wish they'd pushed it into Cancer.
I know, but I think that really does speak to their media savvy, right? Meghan is a Venus in Virgo in the 3rd house, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So she had her own blog that was very successful. She's really good at, she worked in Hollywood, she worked in TV, she worked in that area. So she knows how to deal with the press and working in the public, using her words and speeches and all that kind of stuff. So maybe this Venus does kind of represent that. I think she also has her part of fortune in Gemini as well.
He does.
And both of their children have one of their luminaries in the sign.
In Gemini.
Mhm.
So Gemini is a
I
big deal for them.
I do want
It's
to
a
point
fun
out
Gemini.
that it is a fun Gemini. Sorry,
Mhm.
it's a fun Venus. In
The
Gemini
fun
is
Venus.
fun.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
But it's probably one of the more fun Gemini placements.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to say that I was thinking about how star-studded their wedding was with that Venus placement, because they're both really well-connected people and a lot of people like them a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really thought that that was symbolic of like who was at their wedding.
That's a storytelling Venus too. And I think their wedding
Yes.
was definitely like very much a story of their relationship and their love and like kind of what their hopes for the future and stuff. So I think that Venus definitely shined through like in this wedding.
Yes, because she is in control of all these Taurus planets in the chart.
Yeah.
I will say though, like you said, the storytelling aspect. So the fact they both chose their music, they chose the preachers, they chose I think Charles chose the choir, but they chose the songs, right?
The
So
readings, all of that. Yeah.
It was very, very personal and intimate. So we did appreciate that. And I think it's probably going to be one of the more historic weddings. And also the imagery that came out of the wedding. So that really beautiful shot of her coming down the aisle with the light coming in, it's just like, it's just really like, they did a good job with that. We do see some of that fixed, almost at the 15 degrees divine avatar gate points again we see. So similar to George and Elizabeth, they kind of are bringing in this really significant energy through their marriage, right? They're on the world stage.
Neptune's there too.
Neptune's there too. Oh no, she's at
no, Pisces. Never mind.
Anybody else in fixed?
But also the fixed angles I like.
Yes. So we do see some longevity here. I think it's possible for them. But I do like that their chart has so much of this kind of, you will know who we are kind of energy. And we do, right?
We call it bow down.
Yeah, I don't know if we commented, but I really love the grand trine between Neptune, the moon, and Jupiter. I really think that like
it's really pretty.
It's really pretty, and I think similarly to George and Elizabeth, they are going to like their children are going to be a huge part of their legacy, and I really feel like there's a lot about this relationship that speaks to healing, specifically using art as a medium to facilitate healing.
Love
that
it.
shows up with their relationship.
So in this chart, Harry is ruled by the sun, right? And Meghan is ruled by Saturn. This is a pretty great Saturn, I think, even though it's retrograde. She is in her own sign, and that speaks to who Meghan is. She is someone who built her own wealth and is known.
That's a worker bee. That's a worker bee.
And that was one of the main issues with her and the family, was that they resented the fact that she was a worker bee, and not just a worker bee, but a good worker bee that produced great results.
Isn't it interesting to see their Saturn versus like William and Catherine?
Where did they have it? They had it
that exalted Saturn and Libra in the 5th, and it's like exalted versus domiciled, I think, because you get that domicile, it's like it's happy there, it can do its job, and sometimes exalted planets are just a little they're not given much. Go ahead, girl, give us nothing.
Don't give us nothing. No.
Yes, I wanted to chime in about the exalted Saturn, and I know people are like, exaltation is great, and I was having a chat with one of my friends. I think her handle is, I don't know what her handle is, but she's Ari on Twitter. Love Just Lied on Twitter. And so The thing is, like with exalted placements, like I think in different systems, like if you're studying Vedic versus Western, there's this idea of like what the optimal expression of a planet should be. Whereas like when a planet's at home, it's responsible, like it's in charge of something. Whereas a planet that's exalted is like a guest who's revered. You don't have to do anything. Like
I just
you
show up.
you show up, you get praised, people value
Mhm.
your opinion, but at the end of the day, like the planet that's in charge, gets to say what happens. And so I feel like the difference in their Saturn placement really speaks to like, excuse me, oh, like let's have this permanent like thing, but like maybe we're not like really in charge of what's going on. And I think about like William and Kate's like Saturn placement in that chart ruled by that not happy Venus. Uh, it's like, even though we're getting all this praise, we're not really responsible for what's happening, or we don't have a say in what's happening. Whereas like the Saturn is really in charge of its own like fate and what it's supposed to be doing, right? Like, so I don't know. Like I feel like that gets understated or lost in conversations about dignity and stuff. So
I agree. Even as with someone with an exalted Jupiter, I know I can be a pain in the butt. But they say guests and fish both stink after 3 days or something, right?
Oh, I never heard that one before. But damn. Damn. That reminds me to never overstay my welcome. Wow.
Also, I have to track back to this Uranus because it is exactly at the Queen's sun and Prince Charles's moon. That disruption is going right through the heart of the line of the monarchy, like the succession.
And the fact that this Uranus is square to that Mars.
Yeah, again, like just think about that. Just think about that up for a minute. Yeah.
Them being this fresh breath of fresh air and this change definitely triggered people to act out.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure.
For sure.
Because people went nuts, girl. Yeah, it was not an easy ride for them, but I kind of feel good that they went through some really harsh times up front and survived it versus an easy time and then facing something difficult later on.
Yeah, I feel better about that Venus now, knowing that it's been through some stuff, like that it can carry them through, because a lot of people were like, oh, this Venus, I don't know, it's not going to last. And I'm like, well, if it made it through all that, like, come on.
And she's also in Cancer now, most likely by progression, right?
Yeah.
So,
oh, definitely by progression.
Yeah.
So, anything else? Oh, this Mercury being in the Vents, right?
Yeah.
So Mercury being in control of the 11th house and Mercury being in control of the 2nd house. So definitely their popularity is something to talk about. And the fact that they kind of have the Midas touch, I'm not gonna lie.
Yes,
anything that is associated with them tends to sell out.
Yes, like Mercury at the North bending, like applying to the North node, but also Mercury in its own decan in Taurus, like huge. Like them being able to plan, execute plans effectively. Like there's something about like their reach and their platform, especially now that they've launched Archwell, that we're not going to stop hearing about anytime soon.
Yeah.
So
also, this Mercury being in a nice trine to Saturn as well. So I definitely feel like Meghan has a lot of, like, I mean, Harry too. Harry is no slouch, and I really hate that kind of reputation that people have thrown at him of being stupid. So I'm like, how is this man stupid? He is not stupid. There's this thing that he's the dumb brother. I'm like, where did you get that from? Because he didn't go to college. I'm like, he's a veteran. He knows how to fly.
Not only that, but this dude is really articulate.
Yeah.
Okay? He might not be, you know, the stuffy academic, but like, especially like getting to hear him talk and like, just like, I don't like knowing his chart. Like, I don't understand how someone with a lot of fortune conjunct Mercury and its exaltation and domicile, but also someone who has a sun rejoicing in the 9th house, you cannot tell me this man is like not intelligent.
No.
It's-
Mhm.
I
he
think
is
his knowledge is
intelligent.
a lot more practical, that Virgo,
Sure.
by effort, through practice, through experience, and
Mhm.
also through travel and worldliness, he's earned his intelligence, right? Because
They also said his mom was dumb, which plays.
true.
Yeah.
Not true. I think that's just a lot of maybe projection the family puts on people
Jealousy.
that they know are actually really smart, and they want to kind of dim their shine. So I was like, where did they get that from?
I
Anyway,
don't know.
anything else about this chart? What do we think
Uh,
about it? Any advice we should give these two? Be very wary of your family.
Yeah, no, they don't
Gosh.
have your best interest at
They
heart.
do not have your best interest at heart at all, girl.
Mhm. When I saw
Horrible
that,
behavior.
that Mars square Uranus, I was like, oh boy. Mars ruling the fourth. Woo!
Tell me the Davison.
Okay.
Davison.
Davison. Okay. Oh, okay. So Davison again. We have the sun in Pisces and the moon in Cancer. So moon and Cancer in both charts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mhm. Moon in
Waxing.
its joy.
It's joy.
in
Near the
Virgo.
IC, so
Mhm.
they are going to be loving the home life and protecting that.
Yes, and knowing what we know about these two and how they were both raised, the family dynamics between the two of them, I think this marriage for them is an opportunity for them to have the home life they did not have as children,
Mm-hmm.
right? They both come from unhappy marriages, right? Charles and
Yeah.
Diana was not happy, and Doria and Thomas were not happy either.
I do love the fixed angles. Yay.
And they're both at that sensitive, 15, 16. We have Mercury at 13 as well. Anybody else? I think that's it for the fixed signs. But again, it shows up in the Davison that these two are meant to be known in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
Their
Can I
union
also
is important.
mention
Mhm.
that like they have a shit ton of planets in their own decan, like this Mercury, this Moon, the Mars, like sorry, I have to get Venus. Oh, technically Jupiter as well. Like in some system or other, like these planets are in their own decan. So like there are lots of hidden talents that come out of this relationship. For sure.
And I think we're seeing that with them, for sure.
Bringing out the best in each other type energy.
Yeah, like here they want to build bridges between people with like their communication, especially through art and what have you. A lot of this relationship is built on sacrifice. And I think about if we take the seventh house as Meghan, like making this big sacrifice, but using her talents and skills to like, tell important stories about the sacrifices people make for relationships. And then again, like what you guys were saying, like this moon representing them creating the family life they didn't get to have, but maybe also like shining a light on like the people who don't get to have that themselves and like trying to play that role for people.
I mean, but this doesn't come easy because it is still square to Pluto, right?
Yeah.
So this is through, the effort, the loss, like they have experienced a ton of loss through building this life for themselves, right?
They've been through it.
They've been through
The
it.
ringer.
Kind of lost members of their family members through betrayal. They've lost the baby, like they've been forced to move away. Like a lot of things have been through this very platonic kind of underworld example. Like we're just gonna snatch you to the underworld, and if you live to talk about it, get the moon.
Woo!
And in a way, it's also a growing square to Saturn too, right? So there is some harshness, but ultimately I do think this moon gets a lot of protection as well, right? Yeah. She gets some support.
I like the square between the sun and Jupiter because there's this like reception going on. And like I think about the fact that Jupiter rules like both other people's resources and maybe things that people aren't always comfortable talking about, but then like it also rules like networks and platforms. And I really feel like them building this important platform to give voice to some of those narratives is like a huge part of their relationship. And then I do like the fact that the chart ruler is trying that Jupiter.
The chart ruler is also in the bendings as well.
She is in the bendings. She is very tightly in the bendings. Holy
Yeah.
So
And
that
that's Harry, maybe. Yeah. Poor guy.
There's also that contra antitia between Venus and Mars. And so like them coming from opposite worlds, but actually being a lot closer than, you know, you realize, right?
What else? What else? What else? What else did we see in this chart? I like what you said about their platform and how they're talking about things that are kind of taboo and shadowy and kind of putting it out into kind of the community sphere to be talked about. You know, Harry just did that documentary, The Me You Can't See. What else has he been doing? They've been doing something else. I can't remember all their projects at this point, but there does seem, with Archwell helping different charities. So I know they're doing work with Chef, was it Jose Andres? Who's doing like the World Kitchen, where they go to disaster areas and set up kitchens to feed people. They're helping to fund that, or they're helping funding for women's shelters with their roof, or they're always looking for ways to kind of get into really difficult situations and provide support, which might be that Jupiter in that eighth, right? So in a crisis, they'll show up with like, here's your support, here's resources, what do you need?
Literally like building a table like in like the valley, the shadow of death, right? Like it's interesting.
And they would know, right? Because they've been through the shadow. So maybe, I don't know, maybe they had friends that were able to help them through some of the worst of the stuff that happened. So maybe they feel they have to pay it forward. And they feel happy to. Anything about this chart? Any advice to give these two?
No, because they're already doing the work.
Yay, they're doing the work.
I'm glad they're taking a little time off now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Also,
they'll be back to it.
So the children being represented by Mercury. And again, those children are at those divine avatar gates, right? So I do think the kids, especially, I mean, both of the kids, but I think Lily Diana's chart does speak to in the future, she'll be someone to reckon with. Archie too, but he'll be, I think, a little bit more behind the scenes.
Yeah, Archie's a little 12 houser. It's okay.
Yeah, versus I think Lily has a lot of 11th house.
She does. She has a little stellium going on.
She would be in the 11th house in this chart, right?
Mars. I think so. So
yeah.
Archie would be so she would be Mars. Yeah.
And there she is in that anaretic degree. In the last decan of Pisces.
Because she is the first royal to be born in America.
Yeah. Little trailblazer.
So I like this chart for them. I do think they're going to have a very significant marriage, no matter how long it lasts. And I do hope they have some longevity and they enjoy
I think they'll be okay.
Because there have been so many people trying to wish their marriage to end. Oh, it's only going to last 3 years. I'm like, okay.
Ew.
People are so nasty to these two.
They are. I don't really think their marriage is ending anytime soon, I'm afraid. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, somebody said that, yeah, my marriage would only last a few months. What else?
There you have it. 17 years later. You should send that person
like, yeah, I'm just staying out of spite.
That Taurus fixity, I'm not moving. You told me no, I'm going to stick it out. Anything else about these two?
No.
Okay. Do we want to go back to Charles and Camilla, or do we want to leave them? Do we want Faith to just not care about their dating?
I think Diana yelled at us. I'm scared.
Because we went over it. We looked over and somehow we all missed that chart, which is really weird. Even though it's Mercury shadow, that's weird.
No, that's an omen. I'll respect the ghost of Diana. We won't talk.
I'll respect the ghost of Diana more than her eldest son.
There we go. Well, we hope that this has been enjoyable. Royal weddings are complicated. You know, they serve a very complicated role, but it's interesting to see how it's playing out in the UK. Maybe they hit a couple of tropes that aren't so great. You know, it's kind of weird that they're all about, you know, it doesn't fit the protocol yet. 3 out of the 4 of Queen Elizabeth's children have been divorced. So, hey, one of her daughter-in-laws had a very unhappy marriage. Her grandson had to flee the country. There's just a lot of drama, but I guess this is just how fate works out, I guess. And now we have to ask whether or not this is taking some of the gold off of the royal family.
It's just interesting. They just keep going back to this well, like, oh, if we just have a big enough wedding, like that'll like paper over the cracks of everything, you know? And you're like, how many times are you gonna go to this well, which in the end just doesn't like serve you? Like, come on.
Maybe, hopefully going forward, the next marriages or the ones that can happen after, you know, going forward after Harry and Meghan and his cousins, they'll be based in more affection and love, and maybe that will make a difference for this family.
Well, they should do the work on making like being in the royal family like tolerable.
That too.
They really should.
Instead of just marrying more and more people, like, can we just fix this whole system? Like,
just like maybe this family shouldn't function like a cult, and maybe things will go better.
Talk about doing the work and not doing the work. It's like,
yeah,
come on. But yeah, yes. I just like, this was an interesting picture of like all 3 of them.
Oh, yeah. I've come to really appreciate Meghan's dress a lot more than the first time I saw it, I will say. I think it will be a timeless kind of look in the long term. Yeah. But I hope this was enjoyable. We had a lot of fun. Please comment below if you have other charts that you want us to look at or other topics that you want us to look at regarding the royals. Although we're focusing on the UK mostly, I don't think we're opposed to looking at other royals.
No, we'll get there, but it's just the British royal family is so much drama. It's like,
yes, it's quite juicy and great for astrology.
Dramatic as hell.
So there's always something you can do.
Yes. So you keep up with us on social media. I'm JSoAbove on Twitter.
I'm AstralTour on Twitter.
And I'm Glazed Girl on Twitter. I think that's where all your links are, right? Yeah. I was like, I'm not going to list all of them, but if you go to one of those, you'll find links and you'll be fine.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you again for joining us. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.